guideline came from a local newscast. Today, a local woman finally received that front door key despite her handicap. We all know that handicap is an archaic word, and why despite her disability? The woman in the story is hearing impaired. She's a lovely lady, a mom, a daughter, an employee, a homeowner, a neighbor, a taxpayer. Sometimes the lights in her home flash to let her know to answer her sci-fi-looking computer phone, or maybe just her front door. Most print journalists in Mississippi use the Associated Press Style Book. The AP Style Book states, in general, do not describe an individual as disabled or handicapped unless it is fully pertinent to the story. It goes on to address some terms such as disabled and handicapped and blind, deaf, mute, and wheelchair user. The style book is getting there, but it still has a ways to go. Yet media professionals can go beyond the AP style book and set the standard for all journalists and newscasters in the state by adopting people-first language for their articles and broadcasts. Let's move now to the guidelines for reporting and writing about people with disabilities. Dr. White, tell us about the guidelines.
Okay, the media guidelines are a portable guide to help editors, authors, and other writers use appropriate terminology to describe people with disabilities. It all started when a NIDER funded study to investigate how the media described and referred to people with disabilities. To further evaluate how the media did, our researchers here at the Research and Training Center in Independent Living monitored several major newspapers and TV news stations in and around the Kansas City area to determine how frequent improper terms and references were made to people with disabilities. To do this, we recorded newscasts and read all the newspapers to determine the frequency and rates at which these improper terms were used. So we were looking for terms such as wheelchair-bound, confined to a wheelchair, deaf and dumb, stroke victim, and so on. To inform the media personnel, writers, reporters, and editors on the correct terminology to use, we produced the very first guidelines for reporting and writing on people with disabilities, and that occurred about 1984. Over the years, these media guidelines have been very successful. We've disseminated over 1 million of them to public libraries, disability organizations, government agencies, churches and synagogues, and other faith communities, as well as to media personnel such as the listeners today. As many of you can appreciate, sometimes a good story happens as a result of luck and serendipity. Let me share a short story with you. About 24 months ago, I contacted the editorial staff at the American Psychological Association in regard to their publication manual. And this is a manual that all psychologists consult when writing their journal articles to make sure they have compliance, much like the AP Style Book. I figured it was about time they'd be moving from the 5th to the 6th edition. Our media guidelines were referenced 2 times in the 5th edition of the American Psychological Association's publication manual. And we wanted to make sure that they would be referenced again in the upcoming or forthcoming 6th edition. And so I asked them if that would be possible. And at that time, I was asked to participate in the disability and language sections of the new to be revised publication manual. And by the way, I was able to get the 7th edition of the RTC Media Guidelines also referenced. The point here is that it's not only general media who need to be aware of correct terminology, but disability and psychological professionals also need to be reminded not to use phrases like the subjects were confined to their wheelchairs. Other publications that continue to adopt the media guidelines include the Associated Press Style Book and the American Association of the Advancement of Society, among others. I'm going to turn it over to Elma now for the next few slides.
Thank you. The guidelines not only provide appropriate terminology for disabilities, but also remind writers of portrayal issues. A portrayal issue is the problem with the broadcast mentioned earlier about the woman with the hearing impairment. For instance, don't focus on disability. Instead, focus on quality of life issues. Another portrayal issue, people with disabilities don't want to be perceived as suffering from their disabilities, and they really don't want to be superhumans. He completed the marathon in spite of his disability. And people with disabilities aren't victims of their disabilities, and they aren't survivors unless they survived a shipwreck. Here's an example. The newspaper story commended earlier for the highlighted text had this less than stellar headline, "Overcomes Obstacles." With this kicker, "Disability does not stop teen." The young man featured is an exceptional graphic artist who wants to be an animator, but he really doesn't factor into his life goals. But the article does tell how he had been attending school since he was 3 because of his disability and how hard he worked with the help of his teachers to graduate. And that's okay because that's part of his story. It's really just the facts. We don't have time for a list of examples, but we do have copies of the guideline and the poster, Your Words, Our Image. Dr. White, would you tell us some about the poster?
Sure, Alma, thank you. Your Words, Our Image, since our 3rd edition of the Guidelines for Writing and Reporting on People with Disabilities, we've also co-produced a handsome poster that captures the correct terminology. Our Don't Say and Do Say guide is handy and easy to use, and we want a small 8.5 times 11 size for offices or cubicles to use, and then we have a large one that's about 2 foot by 3 foot for larger office areas. Interestingly enough, Alma, just recently, Delta Airlines worked with us to co-produce a specific set of these posters to issue in every personnel area, so like break rooms and pre-public areas. So the posters were the last things that the Delta staff saw when they were leaving their areas to go out and meet with the public. And the intent there was for Delta staff to use correct terminology when interacting with passengers with disabilities. So this is starting to happen in the corporate area as well. Go ahead, please.
That's great, Dr. White. One thing I do want to let folks know is that you can download the poster and the guide now by going to the webinar resource page for this webinar, but you can also request printed copies, and I'll give that information at the end of the webinar. Here's another helpful guide, the Media Guide for Reporting on Mental Illness. It was produced by the University of Washington School of Social Work to raise awareness on how to improve reporting on mental health issues. There's a particular stigma surrounding mental illness, especially if a news situation includes both violence and mental illness. Experts remind us that mental illness is treatable and people with mental illness recover. This guide has good examples and tips. For instance, never use mental illness such as schizophrenia as an adjective, his schizophrenic episodes. Instead, focus on the nature of the episodes, his delusional episodes. We've provided a link to this publication on our webinar resource page as well. Disability etiquette is basically common sense and good manners. For instance, when you talk to a person with a disability, speak directly to them and not to a person who might be with them. If the individual is an adult, treat him as an adult, not a child. No patting on the head or leaning on their wheelchair. Ask before you help an individual with a disability. If they ask for your help first, respond graciously. Also think practically. Identify yourself to a person with a visual impairment. Use descriptive language so he can orient himself to his surroundings. If you're interested, there's a link to the webinar resource page to the publication Disability Etiquette, a publication you might have seen. It's produced by the United Spinal Association. There's also a link to a quick-to-read Easter seals list. Now, there are those naysayers who don't want to use people first language. They say people first language is fussy, and it's nitpicky, and above all, it's wordy. You have to agree with Twain, who also said, "I never write Metropolis for 7 cents because I can get the same price for City." And we all know journalists and newscasters have to concisely convey the news in short spaces and small segments of time. Some media professionals say using disabled as an adjective is okay, but there's always that question of accuracy. Earlier we mentioned the disabled community. Is the meaning correct? Is the community broken? It's really better to use the disability community. Yes, headline writers can really get into counting words. People with disabilities is 3 words compared to the 2 words of disabled people. Just be forward-thinking, creative with kerning, and go for more accurate words. Remember, too, that language changes. It's not static. It's always evolving. How many people routinely say today to sleep, perchance to dream, and who these days even knows how many years there are in 7 years?